Who is the rudest celeb you have met? What happened? Tommy Lee Jones. I was working as a security guard on the movie shoot for The Hunted. My second week on the job, I was posted in front of Tommy Lee Jones's and Benicio del Toro's trailers on this side street in a residential area. Basically just stand there all day and make sure nobody F with anything. Day 1 was fine. I was there all day and never saw Tommy Lee Jones. Benicio came and went throughout the day and was super nice. He even came out and had a chat once. It was a trip because I had just seen him on TV the prior week accepting an Oscar. I congratulated him on that and he was thankful. Just seemed like an alright dude that wasn't all up his own butt. Day 2 was a different story. I come in at 10 a.m. and relieve the overnight person. I'm standing there and this dog comes trotting up to me. Super friendly. I assumed it was a neighborhood dog that got out. It just kind of hung out with me for about 20 minutes until an SUV comes flying down the street and stops right before the barricade. I see an old man hop out of the back. He points and yells hey. And is walking toward me with a purpose. Get the F away from my dog. It's at this point that I realize it's Tommy Lee Jones. I put my hands up and I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know it was your dog." I don't know if he heard me, but he walked right up to me with his driver right behind him ready to pull him back if he has to. He puts his finger in my chest and says, "Why is she out? Who let my dog out?" I tried to tell him she was out when I got there and I had no idea it was even his dog, but I was only 20 and just completely scared out of my mind, so I was stuttering and stammering and he kept interrupting me demanding answers. By then a few more of his people had gathered around and someone got a hold of my boss. Then my phone rang and it was my boss telling me to just go home for the day and it would get handled. I went home and called him later asking if I should still come in tomorrow. He said nope, you don't work here anymore. I tried explaining everything, but there was no getting through. So Tommy Lee Jones got me fired from a job for something I was not responsible for. This happened in the early 1990s. I handled security at a large corporate hotel in a Canadian city. Any big name group that performed in our city stayed at our hotel. I was escorting Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers from their guest floor to the lobby for their limo one morning at 0430. I am 6 feet 5 inches and when Ms. Parton approached me as I stood outside of the elevator, she said, in her sweet Southern Belle voice, "Y'all sure grow 'em big up here in Canada." She touched my arm in a friendly manner. She was just as sweet as pie. I blushed and instantly forgot everything about my job. Kenny did not even look at me as he boarded the elevator. I had put the elevator into individual use so it would stay on the floor with the doors open, but taken the keys with me. When it was time to descend to the lobby, in my flustered state I had forgotten which of the roughly 30 keys on the ring controlled that elevator, despite having worked there for several years. There was a long pause while I searched the key ring, key by key, 2 or 3 times. Kenny was glaring at me the whole time, barely concealed rage bubbling just under the surface. I finally found the right key, but when I went to put the elevator back into group service, in my haste I fumbled and dropped the keys. Kenny made a louder exasperated sound, but Dolly came to my defense, touching my arm again and saying, "Sugar, you just take your time, we're in no hurry." Kenny made another noise but Dolly shushed him. We eventually made it to the lobby and I escorted them to the carport in their waiting limo. Kenny never even looked at me as he walked out the door and got into the car. Dolly, however, stopped to chat with me for a bit, thanking me and then tipped me a $100 bill. That was more than I made in a day back then. She did the same for the bellman who had brought their luggage down. Total class act. That was my most favorite and least favorite celebrity at the same time. The rudest celebrity I ever met was Jack Nicholson. I asked him for an autograph and he growled at me that he only signs autographs for chicks with huge breasts. Flip side, nicest celebrity I ever met was Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead. I was at a bar and he sat down beside me. I was in awe and stammered out, "Let me buy you a drink." He said, "Nah, you can't do that." I was a little dejected and hung my head. He immediately burst out in laughter and said, "Kid, I'm a goddamned rock star. Let me buy you a drink." I then spent the night with Lemmy buying me Long Island iced tea while we talked about 60s British science fiction. William Shatner said he would give me an autograph in Hawaii when I was about 10. He said let me get a pen, got in his limo and drove off. I used to live in the same city as Tommy Lee Jones, and there was a point in time where if you worked in the service industry you either had your own story about him or knew someone who did. I have a few of my own. Celebrity or not, he is, hands down, one of the rudest people I've ever come across. Very demanding and hateful, he looks down on service workers and treats them like crap but at the same time expects them to simultaneously 1. Know who he is, 2. Not acknowledge who he is, but 3. Give him special treatment because of who he is. I hung out with Charles Barkley once in Philly and for some reason he took a liking to me and was very candid and open. He told me you have to be nice to every single person you meet and it can be exhausting, but if you meet 100 people and are nice to 99 but not to 1, then that 1 will bash you and tell everyone what a terrible person you are and people will believe them. Awesome guy. Got a call to David Spade's room at like 2 a.m. because he had issues with his Wi-Fi. When I told him I couldn't fix it and he had to wait for IT in the morning, he said in the most deadpan David Spade way, "I figured you wouldn't be able to fix it. I didn't figure they put their best and brightest on the graveyard shift." Lamau. I met Jared Leto in Nashville in the early 2000s with my female friend who was very attractive and also 16. Didn't stop J-Dog from asking her if she wants to go F in the first few minutes of meeting. She declined and was very grossed out by it, so we left. True story. I have some clients that interact with celebs and I get fun stories. One client is a private pilot. He said the loveliest he's flown is Green Day. He just went on and on about how sweet and genuine and thankful they are. He said Mike Pence was extremely polite, a true gentleman even though he can't stand his politics. He said Ariana Grande was a raging jerk and literally one of the worst people he's ever met. Trashed his plane. Insanely rude and demanding. He refuses to fly her anymore. I have a few clients that work in film. My God, do they love working with Nicolas Cage. Very professional and extremely personal. Likes to have deep conversations and connect with everyone on set and remembers everyone's names. I love hearing Nick Cage stories. Met George Lopez at a Dodger game, complete a-hole. Told a buddy who works at the stadium about it and he was like, oh yeah, he's rude to everyone down here and doesn't tip, F that guy. My husband worked for a very popular ski resort and got to meet a lot of celebrities. He said Leonardo DiCaprio was one of the rude ones to staff and a stingy tipper on huge bills. On the flip side, he said Adam Sandler was actually really nice and pretty generous on tips. Edit, I'm not going to debate if tipping is right or wrong. That's not the point of the question. Haven't met too many celebs, but I gotta say that Bill Nye the Science Guy was the rudest. I grew up in Seattle and I ran into him with my dad when I was really young and he was setting up for a shoot for that show down on Alki Beach. I was a huge nerd, and he was one of my heroes because of that show. My pops told me to go say hello, so I did, and Bill responded something along the lines of, get out of here, kid. We're busy. Where are your parents at? And I pointed at my pa across the beach and was like, right over there. Bill told me to leave him alone. I was devastated. Mind you, I was like 6 or 7. On the other hand, I met Woody Harrelson and Willie Nelson on separate occasions when I was a bit older, 22 or 23, and living on my own in Maui. They were both super nice. They were both stoned, as was I, when I met them. When I met Woody I was working at Mana Foods stocking shelves, and Woody walked down the aisle I was stocking. His eyes were squints that were red as hell, and when I saw him coming I just said, hey, Woody. How's it going? And he responded, hey, what's up, man? It's good. How are you? We had a little conversation before he got back to what he was doing and I got back to work. It felt like a genuine chill meeting with someone I respect. Tommy Lee Jones was awful. Worked with him doing press on a film he was in and we had to keep him plied with alcohol to even acknowledge the reporters. He'd also grope the female staffers with regularity. Just nasty. Stephen Baldwin and Chad Michael Murray both tried to get stuff for free and pulled the do you know who I am for something that was $5. Baldwin also gave his number to a teenage co-worker and we called it to see if it was real, not even thinking about caller ID. He spent the next year randomly calling her. My favorite celebrity encounter was making a smoothie for Gordon Ramsay. He was super nice and said he would be back later to get his friend something. The friend was David Beckham, who was also super nice, and they stayed and took pictures with everyone.